So GPT 5.2 is not what you think, and we need to talk about it. So GPT 5.2 is here, and it's a noticeable leap in quality compared to the previous models and arguably even Gemini 3 Pro. Now, of course, most people are going to look at this model and think, well, it was just released to, of course, combat the Gemini 3 Pro fanatics, which were all over social media, including myself. Now, I will say on a first glance, it does look like that this is just another model that is once again a leap in capabilities compared to prior models. Looking at the benchmarks, that's what you would presume. You would presume that, okay, this is surprising because not only does it, perform better on the software engineering bench on the GPQA, on other reasoning benchmarks, and interestingly enough, it does so on frontier math. You would argue that this is just okay, somewhat of, I guess you could say, an expected, model release from OpenAI. Now, I'm not going to talk about benchmarks, maxing, and all that stuff about overfitting and yada yada yada. What I will to talk about is the real deal behind this model, because most people are going to miss this fundamental moment. And I was debating on whether or not, making the video with this narrative, but the more research I saw, the more I realized that this is true. So, this is what you need to take away from this. GPT 5.2 Pro is the first model that is actually good for work. And I believe that this is probably one of the first times that we're getting an AI system that will fundamentally change the labor force. I know you guys might be thinking that that is an extravagant statement, but just believe me when I say that. As you dive into this video, you'll see why GPT 5.2 is a much larger release than previous ones. And I'm pretty sure I knew what they were doing, then they would release this. So you can see here the slide that I've got on is the GPD evaluation metric, which is specifically designed for knowledge work tasks, guys. And these are basically white-collar work jobs in a majority of different cities, or whatever you call it. The Western world, now on GPT-Val, and this is why I say this model is the first model that just changes the game, you have to understand that GPT-5 thinking went from 38%, which is well below human level, to double that, to around 75 for 1%, So it's winning most of the time in tasks that the majority of people in white-collar jobs do. And I'm not saying this to, fear wrong or do anything like that. I'm literally showing you guys the benchmark, And this is a wake-up call for me because I didn't think that AI development was going as quickly as it is. Even as someone in the space, I still have relatively short timelines. But, every day that I'm in the space, I'm reminded that, things are moving faster than even I think. Now, when we take a look at this, you can see just how crazy this is. This is in win rate versus an industry professional. So, think about what kind of implication that's have. If an AI system is in an industry and 38% of the time it wins, most people are going to dismiss that tool and say, you know what? 38% of the time, it's absolutely useless. I'm going to stick with a human. But at 74% of the time, you start to think, you know what? Maybe I'll start to use the tool. What do you guys think happens when we get to maybe 85%, 95%? Because of course, we know that benchmarks improvements are coming. Now, it's important to know that this model, additionally, I think it was also able to do that because it hallucinates less on the paper. You can see that GPT 5.2 Thinking hallucinates much less, which is honestly incredible. And I'm, glad that they were able to do this. Of course, hallucinations, I'm not going to get into the big thing. I was reading a research paper the other day, basically says that hallucinations are somewhat baked into the model. So that's kind of good news for you if you don't want to get replaced by AI like nobody does. But this is the deal. I've done detour. This is the deal. When you look at this section from OpenAI's page, this was, I guess you could say, one of the most interesting yet most concerning things. Because what we got to see here was that the difference between GPT 5.1 Thinking versus GPT 5.2 Thinking is completely stuck. I know you guys can't see all of the specific details in the Excel tables. And if you're listening to this audio, I'll just describe it for you. GPT 5.1 Thinking, you can see it has a pretty basic, boring Excel table, after asking it to create a workforce planning model, headcount hiring plan, attrition budget impact include engineering, marketing, legal, and sales departments. And then GB 5.2 Thinking, you can see it does it in an incredible way. You can see this is actually using Excel. Tutorial will be coming on that later. But this is what I mean by when I say this is just a huge jump in terms of capability that makes it useful for the actual real world. A lot of the time, one of the biggest criticisms that most people say about AI is that it's not useful real world. It can't do this, it can't do that. But every single day, we're seeing those big changes. And I think somewhere down the line, openly, I was like, okay, we've saturated the chat model. We've got images, audio, video, vision. Why don't we actually focus on real-world knowledge tasks, which is the majority of what enterprise users actually want? And here's the deal, and this is why I said most people are looking at this saying, okay, it beats this Aggie benchmark. It beats that benchmark, guys. This is probably the model that you know makes the world wake up. I mean, look at this again. This is another task, and it, calculates between GPT-5.1 and GPT-5.2 Thinking. It talks about, the incorrect outputs on GPT-5.1 Thinking, but the correct outputs on GPT-5 to Thinking. And yeah, once again, you can see here, you are a projects manager at a UK-based tech startup called Bridgemind. Bridgemind successfully obtained grant funding from a UK-based organization that supports the development of AI tools to help local businesses. This website provided 5.2 Thinking that is a huge increase in terms of the quality. It's not perfect by any means, but I think this is the model that makes people realize that, okay, this is clearly the world we're headed to. And it's going to be an interesting one. Definitely going to be an interesting one because I honestly don't know what's going to happen to the economy or the world. But even on long context tasks, we can see that once again on the OpenAI MRCV to needles and a haystacks. You can see that, for 256 tokens GPT-5, to you thinking it basically doesn't miss any needles in a haystack. So one of the issues, of course, was no longer context. You kind of miss the needles in a haystack. It's difficult to reason over really long pieces, but I don't know what they did, but they did something right, because GPT-5.2 Thinking is basically perfect, up all the way. Now remember how I said that this model is basically like a human employee? They've also improved the vision as well. So this is another benchmark type thing, and you can see it's able to easily identify things in this image, and this image is ridiculously low poly. But remember, guys, this is, one of the big jumps, okay, in vision. All of these things are just key components, and I think people underestimate a 5 to 20% jump across the industry every month. That is huge. Like imagine, if you had an investment that jumped 20% a month, that would be, generational wealth. Pretty quickly in vision, as you can see here, and this is the one, this isn't even vision, this is the agentic benchmark. Those of you guys who pay attention to the AI world, you'll know that Tal to bench is one of those super difficult benchmarks. And I remember I was like, okay, T2 bench, it seems so difficult that pay like this one is going to hold up for quite a while. And I remember looking at it, thinking that, okay, it's probably going to hold up for quite a while. But telecom, one of the benchmarks, it literally jumps from GPT-5.1 to 47%, all the way up to 98%. So once again, a doubling that we've seen here, which is pretty crazy if you ask me. So the point I'm trying to make here, guys, is that this is the kind of unlock, which is economic unlock, which is, I guess, good for individuals and companies, project managers. Maybe it's good if you always have to be in your job, but at the same time, this is the kind of model that shifts the economy in ways that I don't think the world is ready for yet, and we really need to talk about those implications because, of course, we can be excited for the model and what it's able to do for us. Is going to be able to automate more work. But we do need to understand that, this model is not what you think. It's not just another chat model. This is not that. This is an AI agent that focuses on long context tasks. Look at this. Okay, so if you think that this is just complete clickbait or just, crazy angle, OpenAI had this section on the webpage where it's like, what does GPT do for, my, I guess you could say, industry? And it says here that GPT 5.2 unlocked a complete architecture shift for us. Guys, this is why I'm saying you can see here that they said a complete architecture shift. Okay, that's wild. Complete? Okay, complete architecture shift for us. We collapse fragile multi-ant system into a single mega agent with 20+ tool. And the best part is, it just works. The mega agent is faster, smarter, and 100 times easier to maintain. And we're seeing dramatically lower latency, much stronger tool calling, and we no longer need sprawling system prompts because 5.22 will execute off a clean, simple one-line prompt. It feels like pure magic. So understand that GPT 5.2 with one update. Okay, remember, it wasn't that long ago they released GPT 5.1, and in that short space of time, you can see that it's like it collapsed a fragile multi ant system into a single mega agent with 20+ tools. That kind of gives me the, vision for the future in the sense that, like, these models are just going to be, so smart that, you won't need an entire crazy prompt chain. You probably just need to tell the model, hey, do this, do that. And you already know what I'm implying by asking this question within this context. And we're already seeing that crazy jump here. So, for those of you who are thinking, what does this model mean? What does this model even do? What should I be looking at here? Well, this is the model that is going to be able to automate a lot of work. It's, a better agent. It, can handle long context tasks. And I think this marks the first shift that OpenAI is moving towards. Actually moving towards the enterprise. Because they've been losing a little bit to enterprise. It's not a coding model. It's not a chatting model. This is a smart model that is built for work, for the workforce, for the economy. And we're seeing that unlocked now. So, I'm going to be doing a video later on this. If you guys, of course, subscribe to the channel, you can check it out. But this is the Deutal agent. And I think next year is when we really start to see the impact of this, because things are just getting started. And agents weren't that good, but now they are good, which is pretty scary. But let me know what you guys think about this model. Let me know if you guys are surprised by this. Of course, it really did do well on a majority of benchmarks. Which is, of course, once again surprising. Thank you so much for watching, all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please smash that like button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll never miss a future update. We've got a lot more exciting tech stories coming your way. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.